They won't slap you, they won't scream, and they won't drag your name through the mud, at least not where anyone can see it. But they will sigh a little too loud when you speak. They'll cut you off with a joke just as you're making a serious point. They'll forget to include you, delay replying, or dismiss your input with the kind of smile that says, "You don't matter. These are not accidents. These are calculated fractures in your dignity. Subtle, sharp, deniable. And most people, they swallow it. They make excuses for it. Because it wasn't that bad, right? But Machiavelli would tell you this is exactly how respect erodes. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in 1,000 invisible paper cuts. And once people learn they can get away with these harmless little acts, they will escalate them. What begins as a casual eye roll ends in you becoming the punchline, the afterthought, the subordinate. The game of power doesn't begin with war. It begins with tone, with glance, with silence. And if you tolerate these 4 specific acts of disrespect, each subtle, each common, you signal something fatal, that you can be ignored without consequence. Now, the first act. It's the one people weaponize the fastest and yet deny the loudest. The performative, misunderstanding. You say something clear, precise, controlled, but the other person pretends not to get it. Not because they're stupid, but because it puts you in the awkward position of having to repeat yourself, to over-explain, to clarify again and again until you sound flustered, unsure, or worse, needy for their understanding. In the Machiavellian playbook, this tactic is lethal. It creates an asymmetry. They get to act passive, confused, innocent, while slowly flipping the power dynamic. Suddenly, you're the one working to earn their comprehension. You're dancing around their unwillingness to engage in good faith. And if you let that slide, you're not being kind. You're being positioned. Machiavelli would advise this. Never clarify more than once. If someone pretends not to understand you after the first explanation, don't repeat yourself. Reinforce yourself. Say something like, "I think I was clear. If not, maybe this conversation isn't as important to you as it is to me." Short, calm, unapologetic. You reclaim the authority by making it clear their act of not listening is the issue, not your communication. Because if you let someone repeatedly not get it, they're not confused. They're conditioning you to believe your words carry no weight. The second act of disrespect is one that masquerades as humor, the playful undermining. You express an idea or set a boundary, and suddenly you're met with a smirk, a chuckle, a sarcastic, "Relax, I was just joking." It's the insult cloaked as a joke, the public dig disguised as wit, the quick jab in front of others that turns your strength into spectacle. Now here's the psychological trap. If you take it seriously, you look uptight. If you ignore it, it continues. And if you try to mirror the behavior, you get labeled aggressive. But Machiavelli didn't play fair, and neither should you. He would know that behind every "just a joke" is a calculated move to diminish your gravity. And if you respond with forced laughter or silence, you're not keeping the peace. You're authorizing the erosion of your image. What you do instead is this. Call the bluff with poise and danger, a slight lean in, a neutral face, and a line like, "Funny how people hide behind jokes when they want to say something real." You say it loud enough for others to hear. Not angry, not loud, just undeniable. It's a verbal scalpel cutting through the humor mask and showing everyone. You see the game and you're not in it to lose. The third act is the slow killer of respect. So quiet, most never notice it until they've already become invisible. The strategic delay. Someone takes forever to text back, but responds instantly to others. They cancel plans last minute, repeatedly. They show up late, or worse, they go completely silent until they suddenly need something. This isn't forgetfulness. This isn't them just being busy. It's the exploitation of your tolerance. And every time you accept it without recalibration, You train them to believe you will always be available, even when they are not. Machiavelli knew time was one of the most powerful currencies in politics. He would say, "Who waits for whom? Who adjusts for whom? Who gives time and who takes it?" This dynamic is never neutral. So if they're making you wait, they're telling you where you rank. Now, here's the rule Machiavelli would live by. Mirror the importance they give you, but with style. You don't beg for their attention. You withdraw your availability without announcement. You stop initiating. You stop filling the silence. You stop bending your schedule. Let the echo grow loud. Let them hear the absence. If they value your presence, they will notice the silence. If they don't, you just avoided wasting more time on someone who was slowly eroding your value anyway. And that brings us to the fourth act, the hardest to catch, the most corrosive to authority, the supportive sabotage. This is the friend who celebrates your goals but warns you not to dream too big. The colleague who compliments your idea then tells others it might need more work. The partner who encourages you to speak up, only to tell you afterward that you sounded a little intense. It's not hate, it's the slow sabotage wrapped in praise. And it's the perfect disguise for envy. Machiavelli understood the danger of being surrounded by false allies, those who smile to your face but plant seeds of self-doubt in your mind strategically. Because if they can make you second-guess yourself, they never have to confront you. You'll shrink yourself all on your own. To counter this, Machiavelli would use strategic boundary testing. Subtly exaggerate an idea around them. Share a version of your plan that's 20% bolder than what you actually intend. Then observe their reaction. If they try to scale you down again, especially with fake concern, you've exposed them. And the solution? Cut their influence. Not always by confrontation, but by compartmentalization. You don't have to end the relationship. You just stop feeding them the parts of you they'll weaponize. You smile, you nod, but you no longer let them sit in the front row of your ambitions. Because every time you tolerate these quiet sabotages, you're letting others narrate your worth. And to a Machiavellian mind, control of the narrative is control of power. So never let the whispers go unchallenged. Never let the jokes slide unmarked. Never let the delays go rewarded. Never let the soft sabotage near your purpose. Authority isn't seized in loud declarations. It's secured in the silent moments when people test how much they can get away with and find out they can't. The moment you let someone cross the line just a little without pushback, they learn something dangerous about you, that your boundaries are made of suggestion, not steel. And Machiavelli would call that a fatal weakness, because power, real power, is not about control over others. It's about controlling the terms under which they interact with you. And if people can get away with subtle slights, if they can chip at your dignity without ever facing the fire, you've already lost authority in their minds. Not with a bang, but with a nod, a smirk, a shrug. Now, here's where most people collapse. They think reclaiming authority means confrontation, drama, or cutting people off. But Machiavelli never advocated recklessness. He believed in precision. Every response should be tailored to two goals: establishing the consequence, maintaining control over your emotional presentation. Let's dive deeper. Imagine someone constantly interrupts you during group conversations, not blatantly, but just enough to redirect attention to themselves every time you begin to gather momentum. Most people either stay quiet, laugh it off, or try to speak louder. But all three responses hand over the frame of the interaction. Machiavelli would change the frame instead. Mid-interruption, he might pause. Look at the interrupter, not with anger, but calm disapproval, and say something like, "Interesting how you always jump in, right as I'm about to land a point. Almost makes me think you're afraid of what I might say." There's no yelling, no accusation, just a sharp mirror held up with elegance. And now everyone's watching them, not you. You've flipped the power dynamic without ever raising your voice. This is tactical authority, a game of psychological positioning. And once you show people that you notice their subtle disrespect and have the skill to expose it publicly yet tastefully, they start recalibrating around you. But what if the disrespect comes through withholding, not action? Say someone constantly withholds acknowledgement. You do something exceptional, achieve something rare, and they go silent. No comment, no support, not even a nod. This kind of absence is strategic. It sends a message. Your success doesn't threaten me because I don't recognize it at all. This is one of the most manipulative moves in human dynamics, controlling someone's self-perception by starving them of acknowledgement. Machiavelli would see this as a war of morale. So what do? You don't chase validation. You elevate visibility. You don't complain about their silence. You ensure that others see your worth. This is done through subtle self-amplification. Speak about your achievements, not to brag, but to include them as context in conversations. Say things like, "That project I wrapped last week, yeah, the one that hit those numbers, taught me a lot about handling pressure." You're not asking for applause. You're establishing facts. And more importantly, you're bypassing their control over the narrative. You take back the narrative before their silence rewrites it. And that brings us to the most insidious tactic of all, the collective undermining. This happens when multiple people, maybe even unconsciously, start echoing the same subtle dismissals of you. They laugh a bit too hard when you mess up. They glance at each other when you speak. They share inside jokes you're clearly not part of. At first, it feels like you're imagining it. But that's the genius of collective disrespect. It's designed to make you question your own perceptions. This is where most people either break down or break apart, becoming defensive and erratic. But Machiavelli would hold frame. He wouldn't react emotionally because the moment you do, they win. Instead, he'd create a moment that recenters the power around him. Let's say it's a group of co-workers subtly mocking an idea you pitched. You feel the tension, the stifled laughter, the dismissive tones. Instead of reacting, you walk into the next meeting with undeniable leverage. Since the last idea I suggested didn't quite resonate, I took the liberty of running a few variations by someone outside our circle. Turns out 2 of them are already being implemented in competitor strategies. Funny how feedback shifts when you take it outside the echo chamber. That's not just a clapback, that's dominance. You've asserted your original idea had merit, subtly called out the clique mentality, reclaimed authority by showing that your value transcends the group. It's not about winning the moment. It's about shifting the center of gravity back to you. And that's the Machiavellian approach. You don't punish people for disrespect. You make them wish they'd respected you from the start. Every interaction, every response, every move you make, it's part of a larger positioning strategy. People are always watching. They're always testing. Whether they realize it or not, they're constantly asking, "How far can I go with you before you push back?" Your job isn't to become feared or adored. It's to become untouchable without ever raising your voice. So when someone makes a joke at your expense, let it die in silence and meet their gaze without blinking. When someone delays your time, remove access instead of sending reminders. When someone undermines you in whispers, speak louder but not in volume, in results, in clarity, in presence. And when subtle disrespect becomes a pattern, Machiavelli's final rule kicks in. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, but most powerful is to be respected without explanation. Because once people realize you won't tolerate the small things, they'll never dare test you on the big ones. The danger of subtle disrespect is that it never knocks on the front door. It seeps in through the cracks. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates like dust on glass, slowly dimming how others see you and how you see yourself. That's why Machiavelli didn't just study obvious enemies. He studied patterns, repeated behaviors, small breaches, Because in politics and in life, what you tolerate teaches people what you'll allow next. Let's talk about the social micro-gesture Machiavelli would consider a red flag. Selective visibility. You'll notice it when someone always seems to notice others, publicly, enthusiastically. But when you speak, they look at their phone. When you walk in, they nod, but don't engage. When you post something worth noticing, they never respond. Yet you see them supporting everyone else. This isn't accidental. It's an engineered form of social minimization. They want you to see that they see you, but don't deem you worthy of public attention. It's the psychological equivalent of turning the volume down only when your song comes on. And what makes it insidious is how easy it is to justify. Maybe they're busy, you tell yourself. Maybe I'm overthinking. But Machiavelli would say no. He'd say, they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to shrink you without saying a word. In a world of status games, selective attention is currency. And when someone withholds it from you, especially in a pattern, they're marking you as low value to those around them. So how do you counter it? Not by begging for visibility, not by mirroring pettiness. You raise your own visibility to the point where their silence becomes conspicuous. You start building third-party authority. Get others talking about your work, your presence, your name, not through bragging, but through impact. You leverage one undeniable result and make it echo, whether it's a post that hits, a moment in a meeting, or a comment in a conversation. Highlight it, build from it, and let that success create gravity. Because when your value becomes a public fact, their silence no longer makes you look small. It makes them look envious. And envy, as Machiavelli warned, is the most self-destructive of all emotions when exposed. Now, perhaps the most complex form of subtle disrespect is this: the false elevation. This is when someone praises you for traits you no longer want to be known for. They call you the nice one, the easygoing one, the one who never causes drama. Sounds like a compliment, right? But it's not. It's a social leash disguised as admiration. Because what they're really saying is, stay in your role, be agreeable, stay quiet, don't disrupt, don't demand more. And the second you step out of that mold by being assertive, confident, or commanding, they'll punish you not openly, but by withdrawing that fake praise. Suddenly you're changing and getting difficult, not who you used to be. Machiavelli would never allow someone else to define the boundaries of his character. He would tell you, don't let praise put you in a cage. If someone only likes you when you're small, that's not respect, that's control. So here's the move. Change the script without asking permission. If they say, you're always so easygoing, you reply, not always. I've learned when silence costs more than tension. With that one line, you kill the old version of you they were trying to anchor, and you replace it with someone harder to manipulate. And from there, your tone changes. Your posture shifts. You stop speaking to be liked and start speaking to be heard. Because respect doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being inevitable. This brings us to one final Machiavellian principle that applies to all forms of subtle disrespect. He who builds his authority on sand must always defend it, but he who builds it on silence and consequence never needs to. You don't gain dominance by reacting to every slight. You gain it by letting people feel the absence of your approval, your access, or your energy the moment they try to take it for granted. So when someone disrespects you, whether with a fake smile, a late reply, or a backhanded compliment, don't try to decode it. Mark it. Remember it. Adjust accordingly. Not with rage, not with confrontation, with cold precision. Reduce their access, remove their influence, recalibrate the terms of engagement. Because the people who truly respect you will never need to be reminded of your worth. But the ones who test it, they deserve to learn that what they mistook for kindness was control the entire time. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the person who says less, who others start watching more closely. It's the one who doesn't chase respect, but makes others adjust in their presence. That's what Machiavelli understood better than anyone. Authority isn't granted, it's enforced, silently. And the way you enforce it isn't by punishing the obvious betrayals. It's by responding to the small, forgettable moments others think you're too polite to notice. Because here's the final truth. Disrespect never begins at full volume. It's a testing process. It starts with a delay, a look, a joke, a small public dismissal. And depending on how you react, it either dies or evolves into something far more corrosive. You're not just reacting to the moment, you're setting precedent for the future. Machiavelli would say, "A ruler must cultivate fear, not through violence, but through consequence. He must be loved if possible, feared if necessary. But above all, he must be unassailable." So how do you make yourself unassailable? You become the kind of person who makes others question themselves before they cross the line. Let's say someone tries to tease you in front of others. Just towing the line, watching how you'll respond. You don't glare, you don't argue, you smile with no warmth. You look them in the eye and say something still, calm and sharp. People always reveal more than they mean to when they're trying to be funny. You just turn their weapon into their own confession. Everyone hears it, everyone sees it, and the message is clear. You don't play status games, you end them. And here's where most people fail. They think enforcing respect requires you to act tougher, louder, meaner. But Machiavelli knew that true fear, the kind that commands lasting respect, comes from being the person others can't quite predict, but always feel watched by. You don't flinch. You don't react immediately. You study before you strike. And when you do, it's measured, elegant, irreversible. Now let's take it even further. You want to command rooms, make people respect you the moment you walk in, before you've even spoken? Then your silence has to say more than their noise ever could. When someone interrupts, you don't raise your voice. You pause. You let them finish. Then, in front of everyone, you return to your point without acknowledging the interruption, as if it never registered, as if they weren't even relevant enough to throw you off track. It's not passive. It's strategic dismissal, the highest form of dominance. Because when you act as though someone's disrespect didn't even graze your radar, you're saying, "You don't have the power to offend me. You don't exist on a level where your noise matters." That's the Machiavellian coldness most people aren't brave enough to carry. But it's what makes others rethink their behavior in your presence. And here's what happens over time. Those who tested you, they stop. They recalibrate. They begin to weigh every word, every action, every joke they might make at your expense, because they've been conditioned not by fear of punishment, but by the anticipation of your reaction. That anticipation becomes your armor. You don't need to say a word anymore. They do the calculations themselves, and that's how you become untouchable, by never letting the subtle acts go unnoticed, by refusing to entertain disrespect, even in its softest forms, by making others feel that they are always being measured when they engage with you. So, from this moment forward, you enforce the new law. No more laughing off insults. No more accepting silence where support should be. No more tolerating tone shifts, public digs, fake compliments, or anything else that chips away at your stature. You don't call it out to get validation. You don't correct it to look strong. You correct it because you understand something Machiavelli carved into the bones of power. The smallest insult allowed becomes the largest betrayal invited. So when they test you through shade, delay, sarcasm, or sabotage, make your response quiet, exact, and devastating. Not to teach them a lesson, but to teach everyone else in the room exactly what happens when someone forgets who they're dealing with.